Hey, good evening traders, 20 past 6 here in the UK. I'm going to focus a little bit on the crypto space this evening, predominantly because we're at some interesting levels and I'm going to look for some more shorts. In fact, tell a lie, we are already short. If you're in our crypto channels, you'll have seen that we did sell Ethereum and MATIC. Our orders got triggered. I'm going to run over those in a moment, but I'm just looking at the charts and deciding how we're going to play the next short-term move, which I feel is going to be to the downside, and then this is where I suspect we're going to create a base for the next potential move to the upside. So looking at Bitcoin on a longer time on the weekly time frame, we can see that predominantly this market, as we know, has been operating in a downward trajectory now for what, best part of a year. We can see the lower highs on the weekly, and this is what I'm looking for, potentially a lower high on the weekly, whether it closes this gap here in the futures market around 28,000. We see that next move down, and then we start for the next bull run. Now how this is going to close, it could be multiple ways. We could form a leg down first and then we close it on the way back up. You know, this is why I always like to have an if done scenario in the way that I look at the markets. So you can see this correction that happened back here was very much an ABC kind of pattern: impulse, correction, impulse, and then a drop. So could we create something similar here, which would be the impulse, the correction, the next impulse, close that gap, then the drop, and we'll either find a base at the 2017 highs as we did previously a few months back, or will we continue lower? Time will tell, and this is why we like to run if done scenarios and trade the technicals that we see. So as we look at this right now, the correction that is taking place on the weekly chart, we are looking at the futures chart here, which is 765 points down today. We are effectively in a corrective channel. If we drop down to the daily, what you'll see is this in a bit more detail. There we go. So you can see now we've got several cycles on the daily chart which have been operating within this rising wedge, rising channel formation. Now for the continuation of the downward trend to materialize, we're going to have to break this trend line here. So aggressive traders, if you really want, you could be looking for shorts from the top or resistance trend line of the channel. The downside with that is you're trying to in this theory, you're trying to catch a falling, well, the opposite is trying to catch a falling knife. You're trying to pick the highs without any confirmation. You'd be much better waiting for a change in cycle when price comes into the resistance trend line where you see the lower time frames. So for example, let's take a look at this price point back here. Let's just bring this in. So where we get this daily doji here, we'll drop a vertical line in and we'll look for the hourly and see if we can identify how we could have potentially traded that move lower from there. So all we're going to look for is, can we see a change in cyclical pattern? And effectively the best thing we can see here is, or the best thing that I can see is, where the market's come up, rejected, it's come back down, it's created a higher low, then we've created the lower high. So in theory, you're looking for a break below this area, which you'd be essentially looking at this candlestick formation here to then trade that next impulsive move lower. But that would be the only sort of scenario, just looking at the hourly chart, where I'd be looking to trade that particular move. If you wanted to be a little bit more aggressive, you could trade the counter trend line, which would be something, oops, excuse me, that was a bit wonky. Let's bring in not a freehand drawing, we'll use one of the trading view tools so we can keep that line straight. Would be something like that. First close below, and you could use that as your entry, stop loss above the highs, initial targets, down into the swing, de-risk, and then look to maximize profits down into the lower part of the channel. So as I said, I'm looking at crypto technically, and it is shouting out that we're going to have more downside, only based on the technicals, that is, only based on the technicals. We are seeing slight improvements in the futures contracts that could potentially say that we are forming that base to push the markets higher, but we have to wait and see to see how the market reacts. So the two charts that we are currently short in, which is, one is Ethereum, so I'm just going to go over to that chart right now. I'm going to explain why we're short, and we could have potentially entered a little bit higher, but because of where we are, I wanted to use the price action that I'm seeing, and I was being, I would say, fairly aggressive using the first inside candle. So let's go out to the weekly chart, and then what you'll see is you'll see the bigger picture, and then we'll break it down. So you can see these wick rejections right back here around 1700, and if you go back to some of our earlier videos in the year, we were talking about 1700 as a potential point where, before this crash happened, where we'd be looking for potential buyers to come in to then start the next bull run. Now, once we broke through that, obviously this was a key support area, so we broke through that. Key support then becomes key resistance, right? But it only comes key resistance once we see a rejection of that area. So we've seen the market reject, pull down, we've come back up. Now on the weekly, we're not seeing any rejections yet. All we've seen is price last week pushed through that resistance level and closed back below it. So ultimately my bias lays with staying with short positions while ever we remain below that level. Now if we drop down to the daily chart and then we take a look to see what price action occurred at that price point, we can then start to make further assessments of how we would like to manage that position. So if we just zoom in a little bit, and I'm just gonna go in a little bit more detail, what we can see is price, as we have rejected, oh sorry, I've moved it too far now. Price rejected here on the daily, over to the left, you can see this, so many rejections over here. Then if you saw earlier posts, I was looking at this on a smaller time frame, so that we had a bit of a corrective channel forming, and once we broke below, I was looking for price to come back and retest around the 1500 area, and I was looking for a rejection in this area to trade it short back down into here. Now it came into our sell zone where I was looking to trade short, but we never got a rejection, and the price just continued to push higher. Ideally we were looking for price to come back up into the 1700 for a rejection, but we had to trade what we saw, and we were looking for this. It never materialized, so we didn't place a trade and nothing was entered, but we were looking for shorts from this area. Price has since then rallied back up into the 1700 barrier, and then it's printed an inside doji followed by another inside candle, so we had a double inside candle, and then yesterday's candle broke the high of the previous day's high and also broke the low of the previous day's high, previous day's low. So we had a sell stop underneath this candle here with stop loss above the highs. We're targeting a 1-to-1 as our first take profit, and our second take profit, I'm being a little bit cautious with this. I could potentially look at holding some all the way down to around the 1265, but I've put a second take profit in just above 1430, around this swing low here. It works out to about 1.55 return on investment %. Now you're probably thinking, well, if you think it's going to go lower, why not hold it? Well, at the end of the day, I'm happy to take my return in here, and if it does go lower, then fantastic. I get a better opportunity to trade from long here to trade it this way should we see a rejection of that level. If the market continues to slide and basically melt, then so be it. It doesn't matter. I've banked my profits. I'm happy. I'll look for the next trading opportunity when it arises. We also had a flip case scenario where if price broke above 1700 and closed above, then we would look for price to rotate lower, and then we would look to trade in continuation with the short-term trend, potentially up until this trend line here where we could see a rejection and move it back down. So as you can see, I'm always building an if-done scenario. If this happens, I'll do that, and if that happens, I'll do this. I'm not just going to trade one direction. Okay, so you can see right now we're only entry was 16.50, so we're only $16 in profit, so nothing massive, but it's looking nice for a movement lower. Now the second position we posted was on MATIC, and it was very similar sort of setup in terms of the way the markets were forming with these indecision candles. Now the one difference that I'm going to say with MATIC as opposed to Ethereum is that the trend here was more pronounced, and there's less structure to work with in terms of the horizontal levels, whereas when you looked at Ethereum, when you look left, we've got a lot of horizontal structure to work with. So I think the sell trade with Ethereum was much better, much clearer. But I'm happy to work with this one based on the technicals. You know, if I was to outlay risk, let's say I put $1,000 on Ethereum, I'd more likely put something, say $500, $600 on the short for MATIC. So it'd be around 50% risk, 60% risk of the other trade that I'd taken. So that's the way I would look at this, just based on the technicals and what I can see. When we go down to the daily, if we look at this, and the analysis that we brought in was, we're looking for price to either get long should price go above $1. And what's clear here is price had failed to close above this high here around 95.80, and I was using $1 as a barrier, so I've put potential longs above $1. And like I said, if you're in our crypto channels, you'd have seen this chart going out before we called the short, which was, we were looking at this area and we were saying that after the FOMC there was bullish movement in equities, bullish movement in crypto, and therefore I was looking to say, right, if we get a close above $1, then I'm going to be looking for continuations long. However, what happened? The market ran up into our previous resistance, it printed a doji candle, then an inside doji, and then yesterday we broke the high on all of those. We pierced $1 and then had a big rejection and closed near the lows. So that signals to me that the market not only was indecisive, but this move here was to trap those breakout traders. So false break, and I'll be looking for the market to come back into these lows here and around this trend line. So again, this is about a 1.5% return on investment, and we're just looking for it to come down. We're not asking for it to create new trends. We're not asking to break any major structures. We're just trading it into free space. So it makes a lot of sense. So if you do like this trade, well then, you know, like I said, then it's something that you can trade on your own risk. We're not financial advisors here. I just show you and explain what we're doing and why we're doing it, and then you can start applying methodology to the way you analyze the market. And if it makes sense, then you can start applying similar strategies or applications to the way that you want to trade. So just looking at the hourly chart, you can see this consolidation is being formed. I think if we break below this low, we might just get a straight move down into 0.75, which should be quite nice for a nice 1.5% gain. I'm going to take a look at Atom. So Atom is one of these markets that I have been following very closely. I'm going to go to the daily, and there was some really nice structural points created with Atom, and you'll see how the market, when it had its crash, moved as low as like 5.5. But where we form a base around 8.5 is going to be very interesting for me to watch. Now the only downside is it's doing something like all the other markets, and can you see it? It's a very crystal clear rising channel that, oh, where are you? That if we break these lows, so if we break that channel support, then I expect we shall see a move back down in towards the $6 barrier. So this one is going to be one that I'm watching. Now, ways you can look to trade it: if we get a break and close below the trend line, also watch this barrier here around $9, $8.50, because you might get a break of the trend line, but because this is so close and price has reacted from this price point several times, you might find it was just a false break before we continue that move back up. So the best way that I can see of taking advantage of this market is wait for a break, wait for a close below, wait for a close below this area, and then wait for the correction, and then the rejection. So there's a lot of things that this market has to do before you take any trades, but it's one that's really setting up quite nicely for that move lower, but you've got to be patient. Now, if you guys can be patient, then fantastic. There's some really nice opportunities setting up. Now, because we do cover all markets, I'm going to just head over to a couple of currencies, ones that interesting, especially because it's dollar dominated. I'm going to look at euro, because what you found after the Fed is that the market has essentially been selling the USD, but we are the first calendar and trading day of the month. Now, if we look at this, this should be something that you should all take note of. It doesn't matter whether you're trading crypto or FX, but tell me if you can see what's happened here. I mean, we've got what, another 3.5 hours to go until the end of the trading day, but something very significant is happening with this candle that hasn't happened with the middle part of July, sorry. Now, if it closes anything like this, this is the first candle to close above the range, as you can see here. Be the first candle to close above the range if it does anything like this. So I'll be watching for this market. I think there's some really nice simple longs to get long above the high of that and trade it up into 104s. Does it mean it's going to go up first? Probably not. It might come back down and test 102.25 first before we go long, but we've got to wait for this close. We've got to see that the market closes above this level today. If not, what we might find is it goes above this level, comes back down and breaks the lows and goes back into the range. It doesn't matter, because I'm not just going to place an order long above the highs. I want to see it come back down. I want to see support has been formed, and I want to see the market basically create a base here, comes back down, then we want to see buyers come back in, and we're just literally going to wait for that market to break this area. Once it's tested support, and we're going to run it up to 104. So some really nice easy pips there, I believe, should we stay above the level. Let's take a look at cable, and then I'm probably going to finish off with gold. Okay, just letting the charts come back together. Now, what we can see here with the cable is, look at this structure that's formed. So weekly resistance was formed here, weekly support was formed here, and price has come back into this same zone. So we've got a clear potential rejection of 122.80. Now, yes, it is the first day of the week. So what we want to look at is, how could we potentially look for any trading opportunities, and where should we look for it? So look left, daily rejections of 122.75. Look at all those candle bodies where I've got my cursor now. All those candle bodies failing to close above this area. We close above this area, then we're potentially going to run up into this little swing. But a rejection of this, and we're probably going to pull back lower, whether it's back into the 122 even handle. In fact, let me just delete that, because we don't need that signal now. That's been done, had its day and made its money, so happy days. So that can go. So yeah, as I was saying, we're probably going to watch to see if the market runs back down in towards the 122 and then pushes back up, or if we're going to come back down in towards this counter trend line area. If we break it, then we're going to see a continuation push lower. So let's drop down to the 4-hour chart, see what we're seeing, see if we can see any more clear support and resistance levels. So this is looking really quite nice on the 4-hour chart. So if we look here, resistance was formed, big rejection here, and price, once it did break above through this area was filled, and now we're potentially forming a resistance area to come back down. Let's drop down to the 1 hour, see if this resistance area is still worth looking at. Right, okay, so you can see that it's a bit null and void on the 1 hour. We've got this little this area the market broke through, false break, and came back down, and that was basically the follow through. So looking at the 1 hour, I can see 122.40. Price has to respect this to continue higher. If it doesn't, we're probably going to pull back down into this area, and that'll be something that I'll be watching for. I think 121s, if we can pull back into 121s, I'll be watching for a rejection from that area for sure, for a potential long if the dollar is going to continue to sell off. So that's that trend line here from the bigger picture. If we just zoom right out, you can see the bigger channel that we've now broken. I'm going to have to go out probably to the daily at least so you can see it. There we go. So this goes back right until pretty much the beginning of the year. So price has broken out of this. So in order for it to continue, we need to have a pullback, create a higher low. The question is, where will that higher low be? Maybe we come up into 2340s. But I think where we are right now, we could potentially see the rejection from here to create the higher low and then continue its move higher. All looking good. I hope you've enjoyed the analysis. Some different time frames and different asset classes for you to watch tonight. If you have any feedback for us, please put it in the comment section below. If you want us to analyze a chart tomorrow or Wednesday, email mark@tradeandtrain.com or put it in the comment section what you would like analyzing, and we'll do it for you with pleasure. Have a great evening. Make sure if you have enjoyed the content, you give us a thumbs up, hit that like button, share and subscribe so all our videos come direct to your inbox. And we'll see you tomorrow. Good night, guys.